Disclaimer: this content is created for educational and motivational purposes only. The life journey presented here is a historical interpretation of Napoleon Bonaparte's struggles, discipline, ambition, and rise to success. Certain narrative elements are expressed in a storytelling style to convey inspiration, personal growth, and mindset development. This content does not glorify war, violence, or political power, nor does it promote any ideology. Viewers are encouraged to understand this story as a lesson in resilience, self-discipline, and personal transformation, and to apply these values positively and responsibly in their own lives. Let's start from the beginning of my life. I'm Napoleon Bonaparte, and if I speak of my early life in my own words, then understand that my story does not begin with glory, crowns, or armies, but with struggle, isolation, and an unshakable sense that I was meant for something more. I was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, a rugged land of mountains, pride, and constant conflict. Corsica had only just come under French control, and the wounds of conquest were still fresh. I grew up hearing anger in conversations, resentment in whispers, and resistance in the hearts of my people. From the very beginning, I lived in a place where identity mattered deeply, where people did not easily bow to outsiders, and where strength was respected more than comfort. My family was not rich, but we were not without honor. My father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a lawyer who understood politics and knew how to navigate changing powers. He was ambitious, intelligent, and practical. My mother, Letizia Remolino, was the true force of our household. She was strong-willed, disciplined, and fearless. From her, I learned endurance. From her, I learned that life does not reward weakness. She raised us with firmness, not softness, and in her eyes I saw the belief that suffering was not something to escape, but something to overcome. As a child, I sensed early on that I could not afford to be ordinary. I was not like other children. While many played freely, I observed. While others laughed loudly, I thought quietly. I felt different even among my own people. Corsica shaped me, but it also made me restless. I listened to stories of resistance fighters and heroes, especially Pasquale Paoli, who stood against French domination. In my heart, I admired him deeply and imagined myself one day serving Corsica, perhaps even freeing it. At that time, I did not love France. To me, France was the occupier, the force that had taken control of my homeland. These thoughts stayed with me as I grew, shaping my sense of identity and conflict. Education came into my life not as a comfort, but as a separation. When I was about 9 years old, my father managed to secure me a place in France for schooling. This opportunity, though valuable, felt like exile. Leaving my island, my family, my language, and my familiar world was painful. When I arrived in France, I immediately felt like an outsider. My accent was strange to them. My French was poor. My clothes were simple. The boys around me came from wealthy families, confident and careless, while I carried the weight of expectations and poverty. They mocked me, excluded me, and made me feel small. But instead of breaking me, this loneliness hardened me. At the military school in Brienne, I learned discipline, structure, and silence. I did not try to impress others. I did not seek popularity. I focused inward. Books became my closest companions. I read history obsessively, especially stories of great commanders and ancient empires. I studied mathematics and geography with intensity, because I understood something even at that young age. Wars are not won by emotion, but by calculation. While others wasted time, I prepared. I believed deeply that knowledge was a weapon, and I sharpened it daily. Poverty followed me everywhere. I had fewer resources than my peers, fewer connections, fewer privileges. But what I lacked in wealth, I made up for in ambition. I developed a strong sense of self-reliance. I learned to depend on my mind, my discipline, and my will. I began to see the world not as it was, but as it could be shaped. I observed authority, hierarchy, and power, and I studied how people reacted to them. Even then, I was learning leadership, though I did not yet command anyone. Later, I moved to Paris to continue my military education. The city was larger, louder, and more complex than anything I had known. There I specialized in artillery. This was not an accident. I chose artillery because it required intelligence, precision, and technical mastery. It was the branch where a man of thought could rise through merit, not birth. I devoted myself fully to it. I trained harder than others, studied longer than others, and thought deeper than others. I knew my future would depend on excellence, not excuses. During this time, my father died. His death changed everything. Suddenly, responsibility fell upon me. I was no longer just a student with dreams. I was a son who needed to support his family. This loss forced me to grow faster than others my age. I learned that life does not wait for readiness. It demands action. Grief did not stop me, but it sharpened my focus. I became more serious, more determined, and less patient with distractions. As I stepped into adulthood, I became an officer. But I did not feel satisfied. The rank felt small compared to the visions in my mind. France itself was changing. Revolution was in the air. Old systems were cracking. Power was shifting. I watched carefully. I listened more than I spoke. I understood that moments like these create opportunities for those who are prepared. I believe that history does not favor the lucky, but the ready. My early life was not glorious, but it was essential. It taught me resilience, discipline, ambition. It taught me how to endure isolation, how to turn rejection into fuel, and how to prepare in silence. I did not shout my intentions to the world. I carried them within me, refining them day by day. Every hardship shaped me. Every insult strengthened me. Every lonely night brought clarity. This was the foundation of everything I would later become. My story did not begin with power. It began with patience, pain, and an unbreakable belief that I was destined to rise. I'm Napoleon Bonaparte. And when I look back at my early life and speak of it in my own voice, I do not see a straight road or an easy beginning. I see a slow, difficult shaping of the mind and spirit, a process filled with silence, resistance, and constant inner pressure. From the very beginning, life placed me between worlds, never fully belonging, always observing, always calculating. I was born into uncertainty, and uncertainty became my first teacher. I entered this world on the island of Corsica, a land that was proud, stubborn, and wounded. Corsica was not peaceful, it breathed defiance. The people carried anger in their memories and resistance in their blood. France had taken control of the island only shortly before my birth, and that occupation was never accepted easily. As a child, I heard heated arguments about freedom, loyalty, and betrayal. These conversations shaped me before I even understood their full meaning. I learned early that power decides history, and that those without power must either submit or fight. Even as a boy, I knew submission was not in my nature. My family lived modestly. We did not have luxury, but we had dignity. My father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a man who understood that survival often depends on adaptation. He knew how to speak to authority, how to adjust without fully surrendering. Watching him taught me that intelligence is sometimes quieter than bravery. My mother, Letizia, was the true foundation of my character. She was strict, resilient, and unyielding. She did not comfort weakness, she corrected it. From her I learned discipline and endurance. She taught me that pain is not an enemy, but a companion on the path to strength. Her presence made me aware that life would not be gentle, and that expecting gentleness was a mistake. As a child, I was serious and inward-looking. I did not seek approval or companionship easily. I preferred solitude, not because I hated people, but because solitude allowed me to think. I watched others carefully. I listened more than I spoke. I noticed how confidence intimidated some and how fear exposed others. I began to understand that human behavior follows patterns, and that those who recognize patterns gain advantage. While other children played, I imagined. While they lived in the present, I lived in the future. Corsica gave me pride, but also gave me conflict. I admired Pasquale, the symbol of Corsican resistance, and for a long time I saw France only as an oppressor. My loyalty at that stage belonged to my birthplace, not to any empire. I believed identity mattered more than opportunity. Yet life had other plans for me, plans that required separation before understanding. When I was sent to France for education, I did not feel fortunate. I felt uprooted. Leaving my island felt like betrayal, but staying would have meant limitation. In France, I was immediately marked as different. My accent betrayed me. My manners exposed me. My poverty isolated me. I was surrounded by boys from wealthy families, confident in a way only privilege allows. They mocked me openly. They reminded me daily that I did not belong. Every laugh at my expense burned into me, but instead of weakening me, sharpened me. I learned that humiliation can either destroy a man or prepare him. I chose preparation. At Brand Military School, I lived in my own world. I followed rules strictly, not out of obedience, but out of understanding. Discipline is not about submission, it is about control. I devoted myself to study. History became my obsession. I studied great leaders not to admire them, but to dissect them. I asked myself why they succeeded, why they failed, and how they shaped events. Mathematics appealed to me because it was exact, unforgiving, and logical. Geography fascinated me because it explained power. Mountains, rivers, roads, and borders were not just lines on a map, they were tools and obstacles. I was learning war long before I ever saw a battlefield. Loneliness followed me constantly. I was not chosen for friendships. I was not invited into circles. But isolation gave me clarity. I discovered that the mind grows strongest when it is not distracted by the need to please others. I stopped caring about acceptance and focused on capability. I told myself repeatedly that one day these same people would hear my name spoken with respect, if not fear. That belief sustained me through many silent nights. As I advanced in my education, I moved to Paris and entered a higher military academy. Paris was overwhelming. It was crowded, political, restless, and alive with ideas. The city was a battlefield of thoughts even before it became one of arms. Here, I chose artillery as my specialization. This choice was deliberate. Artillery demanded intelligence, precision, and patience. It was not ruled by noble birth but by skill. I understood that if I mastered this field, no one could deny my worth. I studied relentlessly. I pushed myself harder than others because I knew I had no safety net. Failure was not an option, it was a threat. During this period, my father died. His death marked the true end of my childhood. Responsibility fell upon me without warning. I felt the weight of my family's future on my shoulders. Grief did not slow me, it disciplined me. I realized that life offers no pause for sorrow. It moves forward, whether you are ready or not. From that moment, my ambitions became heavier, more serious, and more urgent. I was no longer preparing only for myself, but for survival, respect, and legacy. The political atmosphere of France was changing rapidly. The old order was cracking. Authority was being questioned. Revolution was approaching like a storm. I watched everything closely. I read political writings. I listened to debates. I learned that chaos creates opportunity, but only for those who understand it. I did not rush to speak. I absorbed information. I trained my mind to remain calm while others became emotional. I saw that emotion blinds judgment, and judgment decides outcomes. As a young officer, I held a modest rank, but my thoughts were never modest. I knew I was capable of more. I felt it with certainty, not arrogance. There is a difference between pride and conviction. Pride demands recognition. Conviction waits for results. I carried conviction. I believed deeply that destiny is not assigned but constructed. Every hardship I had endured was shaping me for something larger than myself. My early years taught me lessons that no battlefield could have taught so thoroughly. I learned patience because impatience had no reward. I learned self-control because anger revealed weakness. I learned observation because action without understanding leads to failure. I learned that silence can be more powerful than speech, and preparation more decisive than enthusiasm. I learned that the world does not give power freely, it must be taken through competence. I was not born into greatness, I was formed by resistance. Every barrier refined me. Every rejection clarified my purpose. I did not rely on luck or favor. I relied on discipline, study, and an unbreakable belief in my own capacity. Even when no one noticed me, I was building myself. Even when I was underestimated, I was preparing. These early years were quiet, but they were not empty. They were filled with thought, struggle, and inner transformation. I did not yet command armies or shape nations, but I was already learning how to command myself. That was the true beginning of my rise. Everything that followed, every victory and every defeat, rested on the foundation built during those early, difficult, unseen years.